Broadening the marketing surface. That's the theme for this week. Hello, you're watching the development vlog for Shokken, a restaurant waitlist management tool that is currently available on Google Play Store and iOS App Store. This is Bill from Shokken, and this is week 84 of development. The current status, as I just mentioned, the app is ready and published on both app stores, Android and iOS, so it's available for download and test it out if you like to give it a try. Link is in the description. The current focus, and it has been a focus for a couple of weeks now, is marketing. In other words, onboarding my very first users who are not just volunteer testers. The approach that I've used so far has been white glove, in-person, going from door to door to restaurants with my marketing material. I did 2 trips, and each trip about 5 to 6 restaurants. I've gathered feedback from about a dozen restaurants in person, speaking to the manager in the front of the house or directly to the owners. The conclusion has been that you can watch the previous updates if you're curious about the details, but the long and short of it is that there are 3 different types of restaurants. Either they already have a system in place, they're not looking to replace it, or they don't have the confidence about their customer flow, like it's not large enough for them to want to take on an additional piece of software. And lastly is seasonal demands, and they're people whose restaurants only get busy during a certain period of time, particularly during the holidays towards the end of the year. So one of the biggest problems of this kind of a white glove in-person door-to-door marketing is the scale. This is not very scalable. It's both physically and emotionally draining when you go out in your, I live in Las Vegas and we're looking at 44, 45 degree weather in Fahrenheit. I believe it's like 110, something like that. That's crazy. And the sun is shining out, and it's just walking from one restaurant to the next, you get soaked, and then it's not a very pleasant experience. And with every restaurant you're there sitting talking to the person, it takes at the very least 15 minutes, if not like 30 minutes. When I was doing a demo, I was there in the restaurant for like 30 minutes to about an hour because a lot of questions came up afterwards. So this is not very scalable, and particularly in summer, not very enjoyable. I think it would be better experience as well as outcome towards the latter half of the year when the weather gets nicer and when customers become more frequent to those restaurants that I'm trying to target. So then what do? After some thorough research, I discovered that there is a way for me to find and target restaurants that are much more likely to want to try this piece of software. In other words, they're not established. They're not knee-deep in the systems that they already have. And the goal is to catch them when they're either in the initial setup phase or the transition period. In other words, this is the period of time that the management or the owner would have the most incentive and least resistance to shifting up things, changing things. So that's the goal. And how do we do that? We use databases and publicly available information online. And there's apparently a lot of services that specifically cater to this. And their pricing can range from a little bit of free and a little bit of trial to extremely expensive, because marketing and lead generation, that's the name of the game, right? I think 2 updates ago, I discussed last update or 2 updates ago, I discussed that 10% of the app development is the actual engineering of the app development and publication and all of that. 90% of it is getting users and the marketing part of it. So the services that cater towards the latter half of the 90%, of course, they can charge an arm and a leg if they can actually provide results. And that's it. I thought about this, and that's incidentally probably one of the biggest reasons why advertising is such a big industry. It's where money comes from, and it's where you're very comfortable about spending your money because you know that the little bit of money that you spend can bring more money in. Now, of course, we're not at the advertising stage yet. We need to get the bootstrapping, initial trust trusted users, if you will. So public databases are things like new businesses, new restaurants, and stuff like that. So, for instance, when I started my own business, the companies that you establish become public record, and people can search for it, the name, what it does, and owner, and from all of that. This is all public, so you can just go anywhere and find it. And what you could do with this information is sort of like, it's a mosaic theory, right? Like this information by itself is not terribly useful. Like, okay, so the owner of this establishment is Joseph. Like, what are you going to do with that, right? Not much. However, because this is likely high accuracy data, because, you'd have to pay money and then go to the city's office to register for business. You wouldn't do that unless you already have something in mind about what you want to do with the business. Because, so, in other words, this is high accuracy data. You can corroborate that data with other information that you find online, and then stitch together a picture or profile of what any particular business is about. I mean, incidentally, this is also what a lot of those big corporations like Google and Facebook and everything do to you, right? They sort of put together a profile about you and then target specific ads to you such that the ads can be more effective. And I'm doing that. I will be doing that on a much smaller scale regarding the restaurants that I hope to sign up for my app. So you find their information in public records, and then you corroborate it with, for instance, their website. You go to their website and see if they have a website. You go to their social media platform, Instagram and all of that, and then get information about what they do. Oh, is this a walk-in restaurant? Is this a reservation-only restaurant? Is this counter service? Is this a cafe? Because public records can tell, okay, this is a food and beverage establishment, but it doesn't really tell you what the business actually does. And of course, with a walk-in waitlist management app, I need to make sure that the restaurants that I target can actually be somebody who can benefit from this app, right? Instead of just targeting everybody. I think that's a very crude and inconsiderate approach. So you get the public data information, corroborate with other information, stitch together a profile, and then my goal is finding out the email addresses and phone numbers, the contact information of those places, and then send cold, unsolicited marketing advertising emails to them. As far as I understand, this is perfectly legal. If it is not, then the stuff that you receive from your inboxes would be a crime. That's number one. Number two, like I mentioned earlier, one of my biggest goals is, profiling this particular business before I reach out. In other words, I have to legitimately believe that they have an interest in something like what I offer before I actually reach out. So in other words, this would be a tailored approach as opposed to a blast out to everybody approach. And after I identify those places, then I would send emails and follow up with calls. This is incidentally what I did part of what I did in one of my previous lives in one of the companies that I worked for. So the memory is coming back, and the approach and the methodology seem to be fairly similar. Now, this is not as straightforward as I thought it was going to be, the system itself, because, you could do it manually, but it's very tedious. Imagine, for instance, the list that I've been looking at from Southern Nevada, I believe, like a fictitious name database, doing business as names, and this database provides you with email addresses, for instance, but it doesn't give you all the other information about it gives you a fictitious business name, it gives you an email address, but it doesn't give you any other information. And so you would have to cross-reference the business name against another database or another data download that contains all the other information, sort of like a join, right? Now, you could do that manually, but it would be fairly tiring, and you got to brush up on your Excel spreadsheet skills. Not only that, because the matching would be deterministic, a lot of the businesses might be missed because they could be spelled slightly differently. They could be formatted slightly differently. Maybe one of them contains a comma and the other doesn't, stuff like that. So now, granted, I don't actually know how much of like what the error rate might be if I were to do it manually, but that's probably not something I like to find out. Of course, you know, this kind of data get updated fairly frequently, and every time when you receive an update, you have to go through the exercise again. So that's not ideal. But also at the same time, I'm not looking to build a platform where, you know, I can ingest external data and then start sort of churning out the leads that I need, because this is far more complicated and well beyond the scope of what I intend to do. This is what a lot of like places, companies and websites like Hunter does for you, right? They gather information for you and then they sell it to you per email address. I'm not trying to do that. So I'm trying to do a sort of a minimally viable product regarding the ingestion of public records and the evaluation of each business within the public data that I find, and then coming up with an email address, a phone number, and a personalized email message. And of course, in this process, the most ideal non-deterministic way of making it polished is use reasoning models, LLMs. I'm looking to do that as well. This is all, up until this point, I haven't actually implemented a system yet because I've been doing research in terms of what I can do, data sources, how to sort of put them together, and coming up with a plan. So now I have a plan. I need to go ahead and implement it. That's the goal for next week, which is building out this particular system and start ingesting public data and coming up with email addresses and phone numbers to start reaching out. Interesting development for sure, because I'm not really doing much development anymore. It's more about getting the product in front of the users and get them to use it. Now, last week I did see that there was a comment on the video regarding I could do social media videos and sort of keep up a cadence and then created this kind of presence online. I do want to do that. I have not done that with the exception of like one or two base videos that I've posted on my channels. The problem, or at least what I perceive as the problem of this particular approach, is that I'm not a video editor. I don't really know how to pump out videos very quickly or very nicely. Like the videos that I came up with, they're not. If you go to social media and start looking at product videos and whatnot, like all the very successful ones are highly polished and really nice, and they have like music, they have sound effects, they have like different framing and different. Not there yet. However, I do believe it's important for me to start looking into this, because social media presence is a big part of advertising. There's no way around it. You have to do it. So. And a couple weeks ago, I was thinking about, and I did implement a sort of a reproducible video pipeline that's programmatically controlled. In other words, I don't have to go to DaVinci Resolve and to do a lot of this manual editing myself. That was the goal: automated video pipeline using tools like Remotion, Playwright, as well as mobile MCP. These are like capture tools as well as layout tools for video generation. The problem with that is, of course, I built it too specifically for the goal that I was looking to accomplish, which was a very short form content that I can publish about how the app is being used. And to generalize that particular implementation would take more effort than I originally thought. So I created this video, tightly coupled it to the system that created this video. And now I have the problem of, if I want another video, I essentially have to rebuild the system that created another video. It would have been faster if I just went into DaVinci Resolve and then did the video manually myself. So this I need to give more thoughts to, regarding how to actually make a generic system that you can reuse, that's not too terribly tightly coupled with any of the particular videos that you produce. but that's another big project, and I'm trying to avoid the situation where I keep building systems and infrastructure, right? And it's very tempting to continue to do that because, again, you're an engineer, you enjoy building things. You don't particularly enjoy selling things, but you enjoy building things. And you sort of give yourself excuses after excuses to come up with different things to build. And I could be doing this as a hobby, but like if I were to try to make it as a business, you can't do that. So I'm gonna have to cinch it up. Come up next week. Come up with email addresses and start blasting emails and start making phone calls. That's it for this week. I'll see you next week.